Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our fourth installment of our Leading Through a Crisis, a nonprofit sustainability after COVID-19 series. And today we'll be talking about finding our new normal, updating our strategic plans and strategic and operating plans with John and Jackie. Just a few quick housekeeping items before we get into the presentation here today. All of the attendees are in view-only mode, participant-only mode, so you will not be able to speak. You're on mute to have a seamless transition to the presentation here today. If you do have questions, we do encourage this to be an interactive session, and all your questions can be submitted in the Q&A section of the chat box, and we will ask them to the presenter at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jackie and John.
Thanks, Ahmad. Hi, everyone. We're so happy to be with you this morning for our exciting topic about updating your strategic and operating plans. So I'm Jackie Katherine. I am the Director of Community and Nonprofit Services at Strategy Solutions. I've got experience doing direct practice work in mental health, behavioral health organizations, and just a ton of experience working with organizations on their plans, on developing research surveys, helping to do program evaluation and program design. So happy to be with here today to share some of our lessons learned and just our experience with you. John?
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be able to do this with you this morning. My background is a little different. I spent the first part of my career working in for-profit industries and the steel industry, and then the automotive industry for 8 years before accidentally ending up in healthcare, where I started as the Director of Human Resources to a Chief Operating Officer, and spent the last 14 years at a nonprofit hospital at a 5-year hospital as the CEO. And then workshop a for-profit rehabilitation hospital for 5 years. I finally decided to really say, okay, I'm going to retire. And I went to work full-time with Strategy Solutions as a senior consultant. It will help you moving forward.
Thanks, John. John always puts his CEO hat on for us, so I'm sure he will do the same this morning as he shares his knowledge with all of you. So just really quickly, for those of you who don't know us, the company is Strategy Solutions. We are headquartered in Erie, PA, but we do work all over the place. And for us, our mission is really about creating healthy communities and healthy organizations. And it really comes down to having strong organizations in all sectors, but then also the intersection among them to come together. And for us, we've been thrilled to have an opportunity to just give education and help support organizations as everyone moves through COVID and kind of trying to resume some semblance of normal operations on the other side of all of this. So it's a little bit about us. So with that, I will let John share our objectives and kind of keep things moving.
Great, thanks, Jackie. And it is such an interesting time. I think unlike anything any of us have experienced before. So we need to really look at our organizations quickly, and hopefully many of you are getting back to work. We're talking about that. I think it's really important to take an environmental look at your organizations, both internally and externally. What's happened, and where can we find our opportunities to move forward? And the challenge is moving forward and sustaining your organization, looking for ways to not only survive. One of our titles was surviving, the pandemic, but it was surviving and thriving post the pandemic to make sure we know where we're going, give support to your organization, support to your communities, to your customers. We understand there's a few for-profit organizations on today, and where do we develop our plans and let's get back to work and identify next steps. Thanks. Next slide. The world has changed. I think we're all very sure of that at this point. I think many of us, as this first hit, we thought, well, this really won't be that big of an impact. But it really has, Moore's law. We all have a tendency to overestimate the impact of phenomena. In the short run, in the long run, that's really well said. I think, personally, I think many of my CEO colleagues went through this, and now here we are. What are we going to do in the long run? Thanks. Next slide. We've been trying to look at this and stay on top of this as Strategy Solutions. And what are the business trends? What's happening? I think there's just a couple of these. You can read all of these, but it is, I think, important to understand consumers are still spending. And there are all sorts of things that we can look at here that what's going on. We're putting a man in space again. IPOs are into this even more so. There's things going on across the world now. So many times we'll see a pocket of something happening. Something changed in the European market or the Eastern market. This truly has impacted us across the globe. And this pandemic that we're going different than anything we've seen before. Impact businesses completely. So, thanks. Next slide. This is a very difficult slide to talk about with all of you, and those in the nonprofit, they had, they pour everything they have. And we're hearing some very disturbing comments, and I'm not going to say facts. We're hearing some disturbing comments about the amount of nonprofits not able to survive this because of limited resources, because of increased demands that you'll have. I'm going to be the optimist that I always am. I believe that communities and regions and states are going to come together and find ways to support those not-for-profits that we need so desperately. So, Jackie, I have a note. We've been having a little problem with my audio. I'm going to close and call in. If you would mind not talking about the next slide for a moment.
Sure. So as we continue with, and these are listed as nonprofit trends, but obviously these things are impacting all organizations right now, some more than others. So, artificial intelligence, right? We're seeing it more and more. And right now there's been an influx of technology and the use of technology in a way we've never seen before. I was on a networking call yesterday and everyone was talking about some of just the changes and things we've seen as a result of COVID. And almost everybody said, I'm traveling less, right? For years, we wanted clients to get on board with tech and let us do Skype or Zoom-based meetings to minimize travel. And overnight, everybody had to adapt and adopt to that new technology. And we're finding things are no less effective doing it virtually. So we're still able to achieve the same outcomes, just in a different platform. And we were even talking this morning, a lot of organizations are choosing, or employees are asking to continue to work from home. They're finding that they're more productive, they can get more done. And it's opened our eyes, I think, to doing things differently. Also, innovation is key, right? Organizations have to evolve and adapt if they're going to remain sustainable and viable moving forward. So we've always got to be thinking about what's the next opportunity or niche that we can maybe serve. Is there an unmet need we can fill? So you've got to pay attention to innovation. Think when you look at the nonprofit world, donors are getting more savvy. Things are being done over tech and technology based. People are sending in texts, they're donating online. So they're just more sophisticated. We're seeing a change in leadership. So there's more women, there's more individuals of color taking over a leadership position. So just the overall dynamics and the composition of our workforce is changing. So these are all important. The reason we're talking about these trends is as you look to update your plans, it's really important to just pay attention to what's going on in the external environment. So this could be local, it could be regional, it could be at the national level. But what are those things going on? What are those trends that maybe you need to forecast and be planning for moving forward? So I don't know if we've got John back. I don't think so. So, here's the reality. Everyone has been in this social distancing, social isolation mode for a long time. And we're just slowly starting to get back to business at some semblance of normal. And back to business is really, many of us are no longer remote when we might have been before, or you're working in the office more than you had been before. Businesses that had to be shut down are starting to come kind of back online. But the reality is it's not normal. It looks nothing like what we have known it to be. So things will forever be changed. And there was a lot of resources made available, right? There was emergency funds, there was PPP loans, there was the CARE Act. So there was an influx of resources to help organizations get through this hump. But at the end of the day, John said, some kind of frightening numbers that, you don't know the reality. But if they even marginally come true, it's frightening. 75% of nonprofits admitted that they're likely going to run out of cash in the next 6 months. 19 have enough to maybe get by for a month. That's with additional resources and support that they were given. And when you look at the for-profit side, people had to shut down production. So it took a drastic impact on the revenue coming in. People are just struggling right now. So even as we get back to something that feels a little bit more like what it was before, it's not. And you've got to figure out how to course correct and adapt, knowing you've got a limited workforce now. There are limited resources coming in, and there's not that ready influx, right? People aren't going to be spending things the way they were before. If you're on the for-profit world, if you're a nonprofit, depending on what you do, you probably saw an influx of people who needed your services, and you've got to figure out how to continue to provide those, possibly with fewer staff. So here's our reality, right? At some point, we all think we can just kind of keep on, right? And doing the same thing over and over and over again, which is actually the definition of insanity. So our reality is we've got to rethink how we do things, what we do to be sustainable moving forward. Our session last week was all about virtual programming and how can you continue to do what you're doing while we were shut down and in the event that we're shut down again. What are the other lessons learned from this COVID pandemic and the time being shut down, or even the time as we start to re-engage and re-enter kind of the workforce and some civilization as we know it? So what are those lessons learned? What are those challenges? And what do we need to do as an organization to overcome them and continue to plan for them and adapt and evolve moving forward? John, I still don't see him. So one of the things that we want to do moving forward is really think through, how has this impacted your strategic and your operating plans? So what we encourage organizations to do is come up with those different scenarios. So even when you create a plan in the first place, but certainly now as you look to evolve and update and adapt your strategic and operating plans, what are those different scenarios, right? So best case, things actually do pick up and get back to where they were pre-COVID. So we've got a full workforce. We've got, strong business coming in and out. We've got, a solid consumer base that we're able to provide services to, right? Best case. Worst case, we have to do this all over again, right? And can we as an organization survive that? We survived it once, but are we going to be able to survive a shutdown again? So you sort of want to look polar opposites and then come up with some hybrid that's in between. So we'll talk about that in a bit. And then it's really important to figure out, what are your core competencies as an organization? And are there new opportunities? Is there some gap maybe that you've identified during COVID that's something that meets your mission? Or maybe there's a product or service that you provide as an organization, or you've got a piece of equipment that you can, build something different without minimal impact on your organization. So are there opportunities and something new that maybe you could or should be doing? Or can you offer what you already offer just to a different kind of geography or a different population? So you want to think about that. You also want to figure out, what are those production systems that you need to put in place? So can you use technology? Can you do more in a virtual capacity? Is there a way to deliver faster, more efficient, more effective through either technology or some refined work process flow? So you want to kind of follow those 3 steps as you look at creating your plans or even updating your plans moving forward. So this,
I can try this again. Is it
Hi,
any
John.
better? I hope we're not echoing, but I'm good. So we even tested this morning. So, I appreciate your help, Jackie. And I think, let's talk about developing scenario. And it starts by, identifying various sets of environmental conditions. If you think we started about what is the environment, I think it's such an important step. You try to go ahead and say, what if? And what if this occurs, and how are we going to get out of that? And I hate to talk about worst case scenarios. I would like to talk about, this is what we can do. It will, and even your look, Ahmad, I really apologize.
I do apologize, John. It is coming across very choppy. I think, if I
one more time.
I apologize, everyone, having just slight technical difficulties. These Zoom streams are always unpredictable, but John sounded great this morning in practice, which was awesome. I'm gonna try to call in audio so we can get you all of that great content that he has to provide for everyone. Jackie, if you want to take over, and I'll help John get on.
Sure, absolutely. So again, I mean, this is just a simple way to look at the scenario planning, and let's kind of take a look at those planning elements that are important to take into consideration. So this is what I was mentioning before, right? So as you populate your strategic plans and you look at your scenarios, you want to think about that best. So like I said, look, everything is back to pre-COVID. Life is just good. Worst case, shut down again, and we've got to deal with that. And then what else might happen, right? So if you're a nonprofit, oftentimes organizations take into consideration grants you've applied for, or a funding runs out. If you're a for-profit organization, you might want to think about what happens if one of our distribution channels, something happens with, distribution, or if, all of a sudden, one of the organizations that you've been a supplier for, or they've been a client of yours, chooses to go somewhere else. So there are often hybrids that are sort of somewhere in the middle that you might want to take into consideration as you develop your plan. And then what you want to do is think through, how do all of these planning elements, how are they impacted in each of your scenarios? And there's actually a worksheet that we have that explains all of these things in detail with some questions that I will make sure that I get to Ahmad after this, that he can share with all of you. But you want to think about, relationships. Are there potential partnership opportunities or ways to collaborate and work with organizations in a way that you haven't before? Or maybe if you've got an existing relationship and that changes in some way, how does that impact your strategic or operating plans? What about your geography? Can you look to expand your programs into, a neighboring county or into a different area? Can you expand the market that you serve? So if you were previously serving, say, children, is there an opportunity to expand the services, to adults? So is there a way to just look at what you do and do it differently? What about your physical kind of office space or your plant, your locations? How does all of that come into play? Do you have buildings that are old and depreciating at a pace that you can't keep up with? Or do you have something new? Are you in a position that you need to look at energy efficiency? How are all of those kind of facility plans going to be impacted by these scenarios? Is there something related to regs, government regs that may be impacted? So there's a long list. And like I said, there's kind of thought-provoking questions that will walk you through all of this that I'll make sure that Ahmad sends you. But what the exercise does is it takes your identified goals and objectives and kind of takes into consideration each of those scenarios and each of these planning elements and lets you think through the what if scenario. So the nice thing is, for organizations that have done this, and I'm sure no one's worst case scenario was a pandemic that they probably weren't thinking of, but we've had organizations that, it was a hospital, it was a relatively small rural hospital, and they were in a position to think about uplink strategies. And so they didn't know, was there going to be a partner that was interested in them? Were they going to be able to align with a larger health system? Were they going to look at, a neighboring smaller rural healthcare system? And so when they developed their strategic plan, they took into consideration those what if scenarios. And then when one of them actually happened, they had already thought through their contingency plan. So sort of like dust it off, keep moving forward. So they had no hiccup in their strategic and operating plans because they had already planned in advance for this what if scenario. So if you do this and your worst cases were shut down again, you're already going to have a roadmap in place. You're not going to have to stop your strategic or operating plans. You're just going to have to tweak them a little bit based on the information you've already thought through.
Jackie, I'm going to stop you really quickly. We did plan on John's audio being a little iffy, so he's ready, and I'll allow him to talk.
Okay.
Do a quick check. Hey, John, you're on.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we'll just need you to mute your computer audio because there's a feedback from that end.
I will do that for sure. Okay, how am I doing now?
Still hear a little bit of feedback. If you're hearing me through your computer and the phone, there'll be that bit of feedback. I think
So, can you hear me now?
we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, so I'm back now. The only problem is at my age, I can't see my screen now. So
Yes. Are you hearing down yourself from your computer?
okay, I'm gonna try.
If you're hearing us from your computer, just mute your computer volume overall. Go to the little icon at the bottom.
Okay, how am I doing now?
I still hear the feedback. I'm not sure where it's coming from.
How about now?
Yes.
Did
Perfect.
it work?
Yep. I don't know what you did, but you're a genius. Thank you.
Well, everyone, I must tell you, I'm learning a lot about this new world of Zoom, and I appreciate your patience. And I apologize. So, Jackie, let's catch me up a little bit. I'll talk about the keynotes on this slide. Is obviously collaboration is so important, and finding strategic alliances and integration. It's a new way of working together, everyone, but it's not that new. It's things we've done before, but as you can tell by today, we're doing things a little bit differently than we typically have in the past. So you have to look out with this. You have to find ways to, who do you know? Who works in your environment? How can you work together on those things? And collaborate, to me, is just another word of let's work together and find ways that we can do things better. Next slide, please.
Thanks, John. And I just want to add, so this slide is actually the La Piana model of restructuring. And so the nice thing about this is it shows you on a continuum the different ways organizations can collaborate and work together. And oftentimes the word collaboration or strategic relationships is super scary to folks, and they automatically think you're talking about a merger. And the nice thing about this model is it shows you that that's not the case at all. There's so much you can do to work together and support one another, let you completely maintain your own organizational mission, infrastructure without losing anything. So I guess I just want to sort of caution, don't be so afraid of that word. There's a whole range of opportunities that you can do and collaborate that you might not have ever even thought about. And it doesn't even have to be to for-profit organizations or to nonprofit organizations. And we are a perfect example. So we are technically a for-profit company, and we actually live in a nonprofit radio studio here in Erie, PA. And so we have been able to form a collaborative relationship that lets us tap into all of their IT infrastructure and even gain access to some of their kind of accounting wherewithal, because it's a skill set we don't have. And in return, we help them with their internal planning. We've done a lot of fundraising and resource development work for them. So we've got this nice balance of ways that we're able to support and help each other out based on our own internal expertise, but it looks no different. It looks like we just rent from the space, but behind the scenes, we have this great collaborative working relationship. So be open to the possibility and just know that it can look different than simply losing your identity and merging.
And Jackie's point, I'll just talk about those of you who, we all seem to be aware of what's happened in healthcare, hospitals over the last decade. Just the word saying we're going to have a clinical collaboration started what I would call the henny penny syndrome, that the sky was falling. We're going to be sold. We're going to lose that. And I will tell you that went from the staff and dietary and housekeeping through our physicians to the board. So I talk so much about communications. It is so critical as you start collaboration processes and working with people to try to communicate the absolute best messages you can to your organization. And we work with a strategic restructuring process. I will tell you, don't do this if you don't have a process for it. It will create an environment that I think is more harmful than your overall end product. But if you do this well, if you do your strategic restructuring follow the steps about self-assessment, who your partner is going to be. Partner selection is really important to communicate. As you're going through this, you want your organizations, your constituents, your customers to know that you've looked at this process and you're doing a great job in selection and then using committees and do your due diligence. I think if you put a parentheses around this, the due diligence answers it all. And if you do that well, you'll get a good implementation. And I think it's important for all of us to remember, no matter how well you do this, you're going to have some fallout. You're going to have people that think, gee, this wasn't a good idea. This isn't what we wanted. They should have done it this way. Stick to your plan, stick to your process, communicate well, but understand you're going to have some fallout whenever you do this. But the end results are very, very positive and very important during these times. Next slide, please. I love this because I'm really a mission, vision, values-driven person, and as the CEO of a hospital for 14 years, the thing that I felt the strongest about is I could walk down and talk to anyone in the hospital, and they knew the mission. They might not have known the vision or the values off the top of your head, but I will tell you that the senior team and the board knew that. But I could walk out, and I think I could go back today, having been gone from that hospital for 6 years, and they would say it's quality, community care with quality and compassion. And it was very simple, what we do and why we exist. And, many organizations, you'll see this mission that's 5 paragraphs long, and it's confusing to the organization. Very simple, concise. And then how do we define our success? Leads us to the vision and always make sure you're talking about values in your organization. I believe this is a model that needs to exist in for-profit organizations and not-for-profit organizations. So many times I think people think that this is a not-for-profit process. It really isn't. And, I had a chance 20-some years ago to visit many for-profit organizations. And those organizations that took this process seriously had a workforce that felt engaged. And I really want to emphasize employee engagement versus satisfaction. When your employees are engaged, they will be satisfied with their work. But keeping them engaged is letting them know why you exist and letting them have a voice in that. Thanks. Next slide. So as I got a little confused with my audio when we transitioned to Jackie and what slide we're on, but talk about what do we do better than anyone else? And I always emphasize, what do we do better than anyone else? You may not be perfect, you may not be the best, but you need to look at what you can do and what adds value to you as an organization. What can we do operationally and strategically so that we can move, we can pivot on what we're doing. Going back to work, when we talk about the new normal, we were talking a little bit earlier that we started, you will do a lot of things that were the old normal, but you've got to be able to react and follow both of those. And I think as your workforces come back into your businesses, we were talking about, going green and what does that mean? You've got to be able to be secure in what you did, what you're going to continue to do, and what you're going to do different. Make sure you're addressing all of those things. Next slide, thanks. Jackie?
Thanks, John. So, How Stella Saved the Farm is this little allegory that actually was written by two Dartmouth professors, and it does have an academic textbook that goes along with it for those of you who are looking for something a little bit with more academic rigor. But it's just a cute, simple, little easy read that is all about the disruption that happens on a sheep farm when all of a sudden there are alpacas. And they think they can continue to process and manufacture the alpaca wool in the same way they did the sheep wool. And they quickly learn that that is not at all the case. So what we like to talk about this because it's just a really important things to take into mind as you try to develop something new or facilitate innovation in your organization. And so here's the reality. And we are just as guilty of doing it as the next organization. So more often than not, we come up with this great idea, even when you build out your strategic plans, right? We're going to do X, Y, and Z that are new things for the organization. And someone who already has a busy day job is expected to figure out how you're going to do X, Y, and Z now. And what happens is your busy day job and the important stuff always squeezes out thinking through and developing the new stuff. So what the authors of this book actually suggest is you form this dedicated team. And so they are individuals who either sole responsibility is to think through this new innovative idea or have drastically reduced existing workload expectations so that they have dedicated time to carve out and focus on this new innovative idea. The other thing that's critical with this kind of, and they call it the performance engine, is the idea of shared staff, right? So if I'm going to think through developing something new and I'm going to need people, I need HR involved. I don't need them all the way involved, but I'm going to need their input at some point. Maybe I need finance to help me think through what the budget would look like for this new program. Maybe you need people from other departments to come together and work with you. So the idea of shared staff is that you pull those ancillary people in only when needed, and they understand that part of their role and expectation is to work with this dedicated team and give them input and the support that they need. So it's really this collaboration of people who have day jobs that relate to what you're doing, but then also those who have the dedicated ability to focus solely on this new innovation. And the dedicated team can be people who already work for your organization, or they can be a new hire. It doesn't matter. The other thing you want to think about is how do you fast track and develop and think through program product development to get it to market as soon as possible. And so this is going to be the same process regardless of if you're a for-profit or a nonprofit organization. So you've got to think through the what, and then you've got to do some level of investigation, right? So who would we roll this program out to? Who would potentially buy this new product, service? What's it going to cost us to do? What's the anticipated revenue? How long before we see a return in our investment? So you want to think through all of that stuff and just start to kind of test the waters. So this is built out as a stage gate model. So at each point, you kind of pause, take note of what you've done, lessons learned, and determine if it's even relevant and something that makes sense moving forward, or if you need to sort of just stop and revisit and possibly do something different moving forward. The other thing that you need to think about is, do you have to go virtual? And many of you have already figured out how to do this as we're kind of on the other side now of being shut down. But Zoom is a simple, easy way to do things, right? I mean, we can have meetings. You can have meetings over Teams, Microsoft Teams. But in the long run, are there ways to make your programs virtual or programs accessible virtually?
Are you able to hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good thing. I just wanted to maybe say something to all of you. When we talk about, going back a couple of slides about bringing people into teams and working together. I've watched a change that's occurred primarily maybe in the last 7 years, that you have a lot of people who are entering the workforce, and I'm a big fan of millennials, so you all know, because I have 5 of them, and they make sure that I talk very positive about that group of people. But I will tell you, I think you'll find that you'll see some very positive things, because they've come out in team-based learning. And that's been a big change in education. Medical schools are doing team-based learning and setting people up to work together with people in and out of the organizations. Take advantage of that if you have people in your organization who've done that. Let them be a leader. Let them be the person to come in and say, we're going to do this together, and here's what my experience is. And I've found that there's some great opportunities to take people that are at different phases in their career, that have experience, that have knowledge, and we have people new in our organizations, and getting them working together will give you great success, quite frankly. Thanks. I'll kind of just do a little color commentary when I know I'm on. All yours, Jackie.
Thanks, John. So as you think about developing virtual programming, and again, this was the focus of the topic last week, but just to kind of quickly recap, or for those who maybe were unable to attend it, it's really important that you revisit your logic model, right? So what is the program you're offering intended to actually do from an outcomes or impact perspective? Because you don't want to develop something virtual that is counter to that or won't get you the outcome and impact that you ultimately need from this program. You also want to look at your program process workflow. So how is this going to be impacted now if we're delivering things virtually? Do we need things to flow differently? Do you need additional staff or different staff maybe than before? And then how can you use technology, tools, resources to support your programming? So you want to look at what already exists. Is it something that you need to look at creating? But you always want to tie it back to what's the intended purpose and mission of that outcome. So here's where we're at. So at the end of the day, all of these things we've been talking about are meant to inform your strategic planning process, right? So you want to think through and do a check. So what's going on in the environment? What are some of those trends, issues, things that we need to just plan for, both internally and externally? And then you want to think through what are those scenarios that might impact us as an organization and have some impact on our strategic plan. You want to think about your mission, vision, values. Do they need to change? Are they still relevant? Is there going to be some potential impact moving forward that is going to change those in any way? So you want to think about that. You also want to think about overall programming, and is this an opportunity to do something new, do something different? So if you put it in your plan, we've now given you some thought process and tools to how you can go about it. Maybe part of your plan is to look and explore strategic relationships. Again, that's where that kind of long list of things to consider as you look at collaborative relationships, strategic relationships. So all of that helps inform your plan. They're all things to think about as you look at revising your existing strategic plan. And this is just a really simple kind of one pager, right? So it doesn't get into the meat of a tactical or an operational plan. It just hits the high notes. What are we hoping to accomplish? What year are we hoping to accomplish it by? So what are your goals and objectives? Very quick, very high level. And then a more detailed, again, some people call them tactical, some people call them operational, we call them an action plan, but you really want to take the time, and this is what we have found is the critical success factor between a strategic plan living on a shelf that gets dusted off in 5 years when people say we need to look at it again, versus one that actually gets implemented and organizations see progress and see change. You need to map out what's it going to take. So you got to think through, we say, just think about the, top 5 to 10 key milestones. It doesn't have to be pages and pages that detail every little step by step by step. But what are those key targets that you've got to accomplish, you've got to meet to make that, to check that objective off your sheet here? And then you've got to assign it to someone. And the thing to keep in mind is accountability doesn't mean you own it alone and you're the sole person who has to do it and figure out, but you are responsible for making sure it happens. So rally and convene a team of folks to support you. But at the end of the day, you're kind of where the buck stops. So when, you know, the executive director or the CEO has to go back to the board and give an update on the plan status, you're the one they're coming to find out where is this objective at. So you need to be able to kind of keep things moving forward and be able to give an update as needed. It's also vitally important that you think about the budget. What is this actually going to cost us? So if we need a new piece of software, what are we talking about in terms of an investment? If we need to hire new staff, what does that look like? And we've got to include benefits in that what does it look like perspective. If you need marketing, what line item are we estimating for marketing? Do you need new space, or do you need to renovate or upgrade the space you have? What's it going to cost? And the important thing to do is don't get so caught up in this number. Don't feel like you need to get bids at this point. Go, you know, if you don't know, go with a guess or go with your best estimate of something, or talk to a couple of folks. So just put something in so you know what that bogey is. And what this does is it lets your board see that target. So if we're really going to implement the strategic plan over the next 3 years, how much money do we need? And if you're, you know, a nonprofit organization, how do we get it, right? Can we raise grants? Do we have to do resources for it? We need additional fundraising? So what's it going to take? If you're a for-profit organization, you know, are there opportunities to increase revenue somewhere so that you can generate that money? Do you need to look for an investor or something? But you've got to know what that kind of target in that bogey is, so you can figure out how to get the resources to do it. And then what's your time frame? You know, is this something that you're hoping to do this year? Is this something that you're going to do in the 3rd, 5th year of your planning cycle? More often than not, strategic plans are done in 3 to 5 year cycles. And we're finding many organizations, and we're encouraging organizations, look at them every year. Life changes so fast. And if we've learned nothing from all of this, you know, it's unpredictable and you just can't plan for everything. So you've got to revisit. And the other thing in talking to organizations, we're finding, while this was certainly a hiccup, many organizations found that they didn't have to stop their plan, but they often reshuffled their priorities. So things that maybe they weren't planning on needing to do until year 3 actually became screaming priorities, and they had to figure out how to do them in a matter of months. And things that they had hoped to do sooner rather than later were put on the back burner. So many organizations didn't kind of just stop planning altogether. They found that they just had to do a lot of reshuffling of their priorities to continue to keep things moving forward.
I will just offer this to you that I think you'll all realize, and I've always realized this, is that business goes on outside of your plan. We have strategic plans, and we know where we're going, and our boards, you know, we communicate with them, but business goes on. Day-to-day things happen every day. So one of the things that has been very successful for us is identify when you're having a meeting, whether that's with your staff, whether that's within a team, whether that's at a board, identify things that are strategic and look at it that way. So we would always start as a senior team, and we would have the weekly meeting as a senior team. And everyone would have sort of a list of what they were working on and what they were doing and what they needed to achieve and what they needed help on. But on that list, anything that was within the strategic plan was highlighted. And so when I could go out and talk to people and say, what did you achieve strategically this week? And taking action, you know, every day, thinking about your plan, identify those things that are strategic. Communicate those things to your board. My board agenda always had a separate section that said strategic initiatives. And we talked about things that we were done, and we talked about that separately to everything else that was going on at the hospital in the last month. And it will help keep your organization focused on doing business day to day, but also keep you focused on that strategic plan. So it's not something that ends up on the shelf and gets dusted off. Go out and talk to your organization and your board and your partners about, are you thinking strategically? Are you planning strategically? And most importantly, are you acting strategically so that you're achieving those goals? I think that it's extremely important to show that you're taking action. And Jackie, talk about our conclusions.
Thanks, John. So as you think about either developing a new plan or updating the plan you have, be mindful of those scenarios. So don't have a plan that's not able to adapt and hasn't been thought through for these what if scenarios. So I encourage you to take your plan, or as you develop a new plan, think about all of those what ifs and kind of do your best worst case. And if you've got a hybrid in between, think about that too. And then think about opportunities. Is there something new, different that you could or should be doing to continue to, advance your mission and do the great work that you're doing? Can you innovate in some way to meet needs? Either develop something new or modify the way that you're doing it to take into consideration, this new virtual world or technology, and so just think about all those things as you look at your plans moving forward. And before I pause and we see if we have any questions, I do just want to let everyone know you do have our contact information. John is just John at getstrategy.com if you're looking for him. And then I do want to let everybody know, like I mentioned before, we've just really been trying to do anything we can to help organizations during this pandemic. So one of the things that we are more than happy to do is if there's something related to your planning or honestly any topic that you just are struggling with or just feel like you want a sounding board to talk through, please reach out to us. We have been happy to do these sort of free 30-minute touch base calls with folks around any topic. So if we can help fill in gaps or react to something, help, give you direction to get you moving in the next steps, we're happy to do that. We've got a vast team with, different expertise in a variety of topics. So if you want to shoot me an email, I would be happy to connect you with the right person on our team to sort of just help you think through something or give you a little bit additional information and support. So with that, Ahmad, I will turn it over to you to see if there are any questions.
I don't see any questions right now, unless Ahmad has
Sorry. Hello, everyone. Elise is on, and I will have her go through the questions as she's been doing that for the past couple. Elise, are you muted?
Hey, I'm dialed in. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. The computer says I'm muted, but the phone seems to be working. So I joined a little bit late. So thank you so much, Jackie and John, for this amazing information. I was able to catch everything from about 10:01 on. John, you seem to there's some force field around your house that does not want our technology to work properly.
Goodness gracious, I apologize so much, everyone.
No, it's good that we have the two of you because that's why we do what we do, and you both know the content, and obviously Jackie was able to jump right in, so that was great. But wanted to make sure before I asked a few questions that we went around to the audience. I do see that we have several attendees here. You can enter your question in the chat bar, which I will be able to see. So please take this opportunity while we have Jackie and John on the line to ask whatever your 501c3 heart desires. In the meantime, one of the questions that I would ask both of you, who should be involved in your strategic planning process, either initially and or if you're looking at making modifications based on these kind of circumstances?
Jackie and I may both answer that in different ways, and here's the reason I would say that. A long time ago, there was a business expert. His name was Tom Peters, and he wrote a number of books. One was The Book in Search of Excellence. And Tom Peters always stated that it's important not to take a process that worked in another organization and just try to jam it into your organization. So there's not an exact recipe for that. I think it goes back to, Elise, it's such a great question because I think it goes back to what is your culture and what's the environment you're in. And if you have an environment where the board is the catalyst for strategic planning of your organization, you need to follow that. If you have an organization where the CEO drives that, you need to follow that. I think, in my opinion, the best thing to do is the CEO and the senior team should be listening to the organization, should be listening to the community, and always thinking strategically. I said that a couple times, and then take that plan and move it up through your organization and down through your organization. But I think that comes from your environment is where you do and why you do strategic planning to move your organization forward. I hope that made some sense.
It did indeed. I've often called it an inclusive leadership model to be able to make sure you know who's leading, but you're also getting the input of those around you, because if they're going to be implementing it, you really want their buy-in and you want them to ultimately understand the why behind a change or an adaptation.
Spot on with inclusive leadership, Elise. Very good.
Jackie, anything you want to add?
I guess the only thing that I will toss out there with my nonprofit standards hat on is, as you think about planning, it's important to be mindful of the role of the board versus the staff. So we always say that the board is ultimately responsible for the what, so that high level vision and direction, and then the staff is responsible for the how. So more often than not, what we see is with input from, and oftentimes input is obtained from those that we provide services and support for, those who work internally for the agency, those who are stakeholders, so those that maybe we have a referral relationship with, or maybe they're a funder, and then the board. So input often comes kind of from all angles. So it's a very inclusive process that really informs the direction for the organization. And then the board kind of, well, actually we work with the internal management team usually to come up with, this is what we recommend, based on everything we've heard, based on our analysis of the world and what's going on. Here's kind of the imperatives. This is what we're seeing for the organization. And then the board has the same access to all of the information, and they typically bless then this direction and where the organization seems to need to be going. And then the staff really thinks through that methodical how-to. So input should be obtained from everybody, but it's important to keep in mind that when it comes to the how of the actual day-to-day things would be implemented, it's important to remember that that is the role of the staff and not the role of the board. So that would be all I would add.
Excellent, Jackie. We have another question, and I think it's from Marie. Having to cancel functions because of COVID, searching for ideas to do virtually any direction. This is also a great question. We are actually working with a foundation, and right now, and the foundation is trying to do their first award event. And there's been all this excitement building around this event for the past year, it seems. And it's an event scheduled for November, I think. And this, this is an event that they were hoping to have 250 people attend. And, an awards ceremony, it's planned to have a video with testimonies. And everybody's going, what if? And I think so many of us are struggling with that about what if. This is something that they are going to try to do virtually if we don't find a way to do it traditionally. It's taken a lot of communications, because what we're doing, what the organization is doing, is they are planning to have a live event. They're going through all the activities, from ordering food to flowers to linens, knowing that very well it could be a week before the event that's going to be a cancellation, and they're going to have to do it virtually. This is happening from those kind of issues to golf tournaments, to as we talked to Ahmad about. My son was scheduled to get married in September, and he's still getting married with immediate family, and then doing the wedding reception actually a year from now. They sent out a save the date yesterday, and they were sitting on a bench with an 8-foot 2x4 between them and their masks on, and said, save the date. Hopefully we won't like this. This is a real challenge for many of us. And, venues are getting canceled, and you're still having to pay the cost. This has a great concern, especially to not-for-profits or company picnics. I think you have to let the organization know, let your community know, we want to do this, we're going to try to do this, but it may be different than any of us have ever seen it. It's a really tough question. It's a really good question. You just have to think way out of the box on this and what might happen, and prepare those for something different than they expect.
Yeah,
Jackie?
absolutely. I mean, and we've seen a lot of people who have been successful in adapting what they were doing and doing it virtually, and they have found that it has still been successful. I mean, I know many organizations have also just had to outright cancel theirs. I'm the president of a board that this would be the second year that we're kind of trying to do a new signature fundraiser for the organization that was wildly successful, like outgrew the space last year. And unfortunately, the vendors and the venue were just not able to figure out how to come up with a creative solution to do it in any other way. So unfortunately, no other option but to postpone and try again next year. I know others have canceled their event, but have been able to convince their sponsors, those who already maybe purchased a ticket or gave a donation, to let them hold it and just kind of carry it over and honor it for next year. So that's a strategy folks have found some success in doing. The other thing many people are doing is really just ramping up their donor cultivation and donor relations, and knowing that whatever signature event that you have for the organization isn't going to happen this year, but you still need and probably budgeted for the amount that you would have gotten at that event or from that fundraising activity. So they're really ramping up efforts and soliciting their donors and kind of compelling them, hey, this is our reality. We need your support now more than ever. Can you help us? And many people have found success for that. Once everyone gets over the reluctance, oh my gosh, our donors are probably struggling too. How could we possibly ask them for money? And many have found that the philanthropic giving has increased because people recognize the plight that all of you nonprofit organizations are facing. So be creative to the extent you can. If not, see what you can do to try to hold on to some of those sponsorships and honor them moving forward. And And don't be afraid to ask.
And working with each other, I think is really, really important. We had a conversation in our last one about what's happening in Warren County about the not-for-profits coming together under a chamber group, and we had a wonderful conversation with Jamie Kane in your area about efforts to try to do that. I think it's really important. I think that will help you find ways of doing functions rather than canceling. If you work with each other, help each other out. I think it's more important now than ever. So, Elise, sorry.
I just had something popped into my head, and it's definitely a few degrees off from our current topic, but definitely applicable. What has your experience been, if anything, with your 501c3s in regards to the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program from the government? I do believe in the second round of that, they did open that up to qualifying nonprofits. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have seen that make such a difference. The organization I was just talking about that we're working with, we made a recommendation. They actually weren't aware of it. We made the recommendation. You need to look at the payroll protection, and it was the executive director told me this yesterday, and she said, "Oh my goodness, this has been life-saving. It's been very important to us." So yes, get the information out there. I'm not going to claim to be an expert, but there are people out there that know about this, and I think it's important, really important that you brought this up, Elise. Know to ask, right? For those of you on this call, and if you can take advantage of it, it can be very, very beneficial to you. Great point, everyone. Put that in your heads that Elise asked that question, because it's very important.
Yeah, and I do know that there's still a considerable amount available. So I'm of the mentality, throw the spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks, what's available to all of these organizations, because every little bit will make a really big difference going forward. So definitely just wanted to see what your feedback was. So that sounds good. And again, I actually do have some pretty good knowledge of the program and was successful doing it for my business. So if anybody that's on the call wants to chat about it, I'm here and would be happy to. But in the interest of time, I have 11:08. Again, I want to thank you both so much for your time and expertise. And also remind everybody on the line that you did say that you were available if they wanted to chat offline about some of the things that they're going through and their approach that they're going to take to overcoming this, and maybe being prepared for what potentially could be coming in the next few months and or year. Because I think we have to just be aware and be realistic that the landscape is changing and probably will continue to change, and how can we adapt to it. So John, Jackie, thank you so much. Ahmad, thank you. The Chamber has just been an amazing partner for us throughout this program. We are kicking off round 2 of the 501c free voting on July 15th. That will be done online. Lots more information to come on that, and look forward to more interactions with both you, John and Jackie. Have a great rest of your week, everyone, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining.